What's up, everyone? I'm going to answer a question today. The question I get asked a lot, and it's a question that's easy for me to answer, but it's not exactly the answer for everyone. I'll just give you how I did it and what maybe a suggestion I would give to people. Question is, how did you become, and I'm going to put quotes on this, pro? I always like to say, I just fish for a living. How I started fishing for a living. Everyone, and I actually get this not even so much from fishermen sometimes. I get it more from just people that don't know anything about fishing. They're like, hey, did you just pick it up one day? Did you do it when you were younger? Things like that. I grew up watching the Bassmaster Elite Series, or Bassmaster 150 on TV, and I was like, I wanted to do that. But there was really no blueprint on how to go do that, right? I mean, I didn't have a boat. I didn't even know anyone in my family that had a boat that I could go fish. I just knew I liked to fish, and I was fishing from the bank. And luckily, in high school, I lived at a place called Cape Royale. It was a marina on Lake Livingston. So I was able to walk the bank and fish. I've done videos about this, and that's just what I did. And slowly and surely, as you start walking the bank, you meet people and things like that. And I was able to start going fishing with certain people. A guy named Mark Malone was the first guy I ever fished a tournament with. He asked me to fish a tournament. I was in high school, and I think we came in second. I think I got big bass. Anyways, kept going. My dad grew up fishing, and I used to fish with him all the time. And he had a pontoon boat. And so we would white bass fish and catfish and do some things. And I eventually got like a 1970 Washita, stick steering Washita with an old Evinrude 40 horse on it. And it wasn't really mine, it was my dad's. And I got to use that a little bit. And I used to go fish with my buddy Eddie, and we would fish some bass tournaments. And then eventually my dad bought an old Stealth, and we had that thing forever. And so I fished some tournaments with him. I fished some with my buddy Eddie, and I just fished as much as I possibly could. And we did really good, but this is local stuff. This is just local Lake Livingston, some Lake Conroe, Lake Houston things. Never on Rayburn, never on something big like that, not till much later. That just kind of carried over into college, right? And so I was going to college, driving home almost every weekend, fishing a tournament with my buddy Eddie, anything that we could get into. And I didn't really have some plan. I was just in college, and I was fishing a lot. Now, back then, there was no college fishing or high school fishing or anything like that. I think college fishing was around. But man, I had grown up fishing against adults my entire life, like the grown men. I mean, I could just start, the Russell Cecils, the David Curtises. I mean, Toby Hartzels, Scott Davids. I mean, I was just fishing against, I could just keep going on and on. I was just used to fishing against those guys all the time. So I remembered college fishing being around, but I was like, I wasn't going to go fish against those college kids. I was already fishing against the grown-ups since I was in high school. So I never went that route. I don't think there was anything in that route as well when I first started. So I just always looked at it as I had to get to that level. There was no stepping stone. To fish, you went up and fished against those guys. And as I'm going to college, just fishing as much as possible, working a whole bunch, and college became kind of secondary to me, to be honest with you. I would go to school for a semester, and then a lot of times in the springtime, I would take off a semester, work a lot, and fish a lot. And that went on for a couple years. My dad had passed away over like the Christmas break, and so when I went back, I knew I eventually had to go get like my own boat, and I didn't really know how to do it, but I want to say it worked out, but not really. But anyways, I ended up buying this really, really old boat just to fish these tournaments out of, and I started fishing more tournaments in the springtime. And that spring was the first time that me and my buddy Jarrett, we won a Bass and Bucks on Rayburn with like 35 pounds, and we won quite a bit of money. Now, before that, I had already won a boat. We had won a boat on Conroe, me and my buddy Eddie, But at the time we sold it, I needed the money more than I needed the boat. Time fishing was so hard, it was just everything I could do. And we were winning a lot, luckily. I mean, and we won a lot of money back then on everything. But man, without any, when I say help, it was hard. It was just hard to like survive. And it didn't matter how many tournaments we did good in, right? I mean, and because you weren't fishing tournaments for like $50,000, right? We were fishing tournaments where you won 1,000, 2,000, a couple hundred here. And as a college kid, don't get me wrong, that was a bunch. I mean, it was a lot. But in today's world, I mean, that's nothing when you look at boats and gas and tackle and everything you got to do to stay up there. And entry fees, I mean, it was travel, it was a lot. And even back then, I don't even know how we were staying in places. I mean, it was just crazy. After we had won that Bass and Bucks, we had a pretty good spring, enough to where the summer kind of came along, and I kept on doing good. And I looked up and I was like, man, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do this fall, because I wanted to kind of keep fishing. So I kind of didn't go to school the next semester and kept fishing. And I was really close to graduating. Like, I was pretty close, but I figured I better take that opportunity right then and there. And it wasn't easy. I just kept fishing local tournaments. And when I say local, it was the Rayburn Bend tournaments. It was the Toledo Bend tournaments. It was still going back home on Livingston and Conroe. And I fished as much as I could, because my thought process was this: I'll keep on making money in tournaments. Now, I might miss some money here and there in some tournaments, but the more tournaments I fished, the more chances I have to make money. First started fishing Rayburn, I got very good at cashing checks, but I wasn't good at winning. I was good at winning back home on Livingston and some other places. I was really good at winning there. I wasn't really good at Rayburn, and I started cashing all these checks, and it was great. But I looked up and I'm like, man, it was hard to make a whole bunch of money. So eventually, somewhere in there, I had to start going after wins, like the big money, and it worked. We started winning big events, and it was good. The problem was, I looked up and I stopped cashing checks very much. I was like, we would only win or not cash checks. And so, but it was a style of fishing that I had to develop to win, because I would look up and I'd go, "What, man? There's some of these guys always catching a giant. I don't catch any giants in any of these events. Very rarely do I." And then all of a sudden we started winning, and I started catching big ones all the time. But I gotta admit, that was scary, because I would look up at the end of the year going, man, if we hadn't won that event, or if we hadn't won that event, where would I be? I don't think I'd still be fishing. So I eventually had to learn how to get really good at still being able to catch big ones and cash checks. And that's where I started. So it started making me fairly good at fishing and being able to translate that everywhere. And I eventually started fishing some Toyotas and some things like that. Now, I'm going to show you something. This was something that frustrated me, and I don't know hear about it much anymore. And I don't know if that's because the sport's changed or the people in the sport have changed. But there's got to be some people that will relate to this. There has to be. At this age, it seems like most of the younger kids that are fishing, the younger people, they I don't know, they have a lot nicer boats than I would have at that age. And I'm not knocking any of this. I'm just gonna show y'all something. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if this is being talked about much anymore. I think it just gets looked over, and it's just bad luck, right? But so here it is. I'm gonna show you my results of fishing the FLW event and where it all changed. Okay, so here it is. All right, so this is they were called Everstarts, Costas, now they're called the Toyotas. If you look down at 2007, that was the first year I ever fished it, okay, out of my old boat. Fished in 2008, old boat. 2009, old boat. So we won a boat. Me and my buddy Brent won a championship on Rayburn and Toledo, and we won a brand new Legend. This is my first ever brand new boat at 30 years old. So I didn't get the boat till basically months later, right? Because they had to build it and everything. So even most of 2010, I didn't even have that boat. 2011 was my first year I ever had a boat, a brand new boat. And if you look from 2007 to 2010, and then look at after I had a brand new boat, right? So I was 60th overall and 34th and 57th. Then I won my first thing of the year. But if you look over there, I did have one bad year where I finished 55th. And then that other one, that 93rd, I only fished one event that year. And so I think that was the year we were fishing all the opens. Thing changed when I had a brand new boat. Now, I mean, that's telling, very telling. So I show that for this reason. Back then, there used to be a lot of things that people used to say, and they don't get said much anymore because I think people have finally, like, you can't say it with a straight face, right? If you say it with a straight face, I mean, that means you're just really good at lying. That's really all it is. But back then, guys would be like, oh, it's not about the boat you have. It's not about this. It's not about the money. It's just about your fishing ability. No, it's not. It is about the money. It is about certain things. And I'm not knocking those things. Like, I just, it's obvious. It was obvious to me because my boat was breaking down constantly. I spent more time fixing my boat than I did fishing. I did a lot of different things. I couldn't go to certain places. And what I mean by certain places, I couldn't fish certain places on the lake if the wind was blowing. Because back then, they didn't cancel tournaments very much. I mean, they sent you out in some nasty stuff, and everyone's boat used to, like, tear up. Well, they'd go just fix their boat the next weekend if it tore up. They'd take that chance. Not me. If my boat messed up, I might not have had enough money to fix it for the next, 4 or 5 months. So the risk wasn't worth the reward for me. I'm like, I'm not messing up my boat. I remember looking at certain events and guys' trolling motors would be ripped off their brand new boats from the wind. They'd be in the top 10, and I'm going, how is that? How are they? That just blew my mind. That they would take that risk and do that because I couldn't do that. And so I looked at it differently, but I just kept my head down and I just kept fishing. And I just fished as many tournaments as I could. Luckily, I lived in a part of the country that I could fish basically year round. I was really smart at incentives. I was really smart at, I put all my money back into fishing. And I didn't really have sponsor help. I would get little help here and there at times. When I say little help, I always used to tell everyone I make about 90 to 95% of my income from fishing tournaments, just from straight winnings. And I did that for probably 10 to 12 years, maybe 14 years, 12 years, probably about 12 to 13 years. I was fishing minimum 40, usually somewhere around 45 tournaments a year. And I just kept on doing it. And I know I had qualified for the elites in 2009, was in no shape to go do all that, to go try. Qualified for the tour, you can see on there, I don't know how many times I've qualified for the tour. And I eventually did it, but I was much older then. And so, we're talking 38. I didn't have my first brand new boat till I was 30. And I'd been fishing for like 15 years in tournaments now. And I would say on my own fishing, when like I'd fished for the most part where all of my income basically came for the last 5 or 6 years was straight out of a 10 to 12-year-old boat. And it was hard. And it seemed like all I did was win enough money, to live and do all that stuff. I had no money in savings for the most part. I kept money in savings just in case I ever got on a drought or a bad run. But I always used to tell people, like, I would usually have enough money for about a couple months. And if I didn't do good in tournaments for a couple months, I was going to have to quit fishing. Like, I knew that. Like, so for years, it was always just about, I was like, man, if I ever get on a bad run, I'm going to be done fishing here in a couple months. Back in college, it was way worse than that. I mean, I used to take rent money and put that up. So my road to being a pro, or basically what I just say, fishing for a living, I just kept on fishing tournaments. What that allowed, though, is this. It allowed me to meet a lot of people within the industry from whatever aspect of it. I was just always around. And when I mean by always around, I was at this tournament, I was at that tournament, I was over here. I eventually got with Strike Pro, and just because another buddy fished, and like I said, it was just these weird little web of connections. And I was able to go to ICAST finally. And at ICAST, I met people. And when I won that boat, Randy Quall's own Legend, it allowed me to meet Randy. And Randy, then I worked a big bass tournament with Randy on Raver. And I met Robert Shamlin, who was the co-owner of Power Pole. So, I mean, that and Power Pole was just coming around. So that's what happened. I just the connections of doing all that. It's how I met my good friend Phil Marks of Strike King, who is now passed on. But I was just always at events, and all of a sudden he started fishing again, and he was at events, and we kind of got to know each other, and that formed this whole Strike King thing. And I can just go on and on and on. Russell Cecil, my fishing partner, for years, he lived right down the road from me. We didn't know each other, but my best friend Brent, who at the time we were traveling a little bit together, and he was fishing the co-angler side and still does, or he doesn't do it anymore, but which is funny because me and Brent are heading to a championship in a couple days, still fishing together. But we're talking, I don't even know how long ago, 10 years ago. He's fishing the co-angler side on Choke Canyon, which is funny. That's where we're going to fish our championship the next couple of days. But anyways, he draws Russell Cecil. They get to kind of talking, and Russell asks about me. Next thing you know, me and Russell kind of meet up a couple months later at Toledo Bend and stay together. And then the connections through him, because he had a sales rep company, so he knew certain people. He introduced me to Mike Valster of Sunline, and so that's where the connections go. And that's what it was for me, is that fishing was so much, it wasn't who you know, but it was just connecting through the people of the industry, and they get to see you as, hey, this guy's everywhere. He's just going to be everywhere, right? And it's in this industry, what you see a lot of is, you see a lot of people who fish, and that's all, right? Like, you don't see them anywhere else. I'll throw this out there. They don't have to be anywhere else. They don't have to do sponsor stuff and things like that. They have enough money. They can go do whatever they want to do and just fish and show up to an event. But that's not for everyone. That wasn't for me. And I like the way I did it. Would I have changed it? No. Would I have liked to have gone and fished the elites? Yeah, I would have. I would have liked to have fished the tour longer and done some of that stuff. I would have liked to have fished the tour when it was cheaper and they paid out twice as much money, right? But that was then, this is now, and things have changed. I've learned a lot. I've learned that fishing those tour and all that stuff isn't everything. It's not always what it's cracked up to be. It's not bad. It's just, it depends. I'm at a different stage in my life right now where I'm actually kind of getting to do a little bit of everything. So it's actually pretty cool. I'm actually getting to be, I can promise you one thing. If I had never fished the tour and then stopped fishing the tour, none of this YouTube stuff, none of it would have been possible. None of it, guaranteed. So it's been pretty cool in that aspect. So it made me learn this, which I've enjoyed a lot. I've enjoyed talking to all y'all, teaching all y'all stuff, telling you stories like this, because I think a lot of people want to know, and I don't think there's a lot of really good information about that. Nowadays, there's so much high school and college and fishing, and that's how you run into it, and that's where I kind of knocked it, to be honest with y'all, when I was younger. I knocked it for a long time, that whole side of it. The reason I knocked it is because I didn't go that route, and so it didn't make a lot of sense to me. I think I would probably go that route now, because I just think that's the way there it's hitting. So it gives you a lot of opportunities. Like I said, we didn't have those opportunities. And when I say I don't know much about it, I can't tell you that avenue to take because I'm not 100% sure where it leads. But it is an avenue out there. In my way, my avenue was a hard one. It was a different one. You know, I see people now with social media and stuff. There's a lot more people that are guiding now to make ends meet. I never guided because I didn't want to. It was too hard to guide when we were fishing in all those tournaments. There was no guides allowed, and I didn't feel right to go out there and take people on guide trips and not take them to what I considered like the good stuff. Like I wanted to teach people. I didn't really want to like take people on fish catching trips. I wanted to teach you, but I couldn't guide. There was no way you could guide on these lakes, and they all wanted to go to Rayburn and these places I was doing good on. I couldn't do that in fish tournaments. And I learned, I was like, man, I can just go fish a tournament for one day a week, you know, and make enough money that in a tournament to where it would take me 2 or 3 weeks to guide, or a month or 2 months or 3 months to guide. So that's what I started doing. Plus I liked fishing and traveling around on all these different lakes. Like y'all know me, I can only handle so much of one lake. Like I just hate it, and I love fishing some of these other lakes. Like I enjoy it. I sometimes do better. So that was kind of my journey into this. It was just a lot of tournaments, and I'm still fishing a lot of tournaments. Not as many anymore. I still think I'm gonna get 30 tournaments in this year, or 25 to 30. I'll have to look at it, just because I like to tournament fish. I still enjoy that aspect of it. I hope y'all like that. That's how the short version, I guess, of how I became a professional, or a guy who basically just, you know, still fishes for a living. And if y'all have any other questions, ask me. I've got stories for days about all this fishing stuff, man, and all those tournaments. I mean, we're talking about over 1,000 tournaments I've probably fished in my lifetime, and stories upon stories. One day maybe we'll get them all out there. Hey, so if you see me out there, guys, come holler at me, ask me a question. Always willing to help. See y'all.